What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I thought it would be fun today to make a video detailing a brief history of my musical obsessions while I'm putting on makeup. I'm trying really hard to just enjoy and be lazy during this last week before I start truck driver training. Yeah, it's official. I'm starting next week. And man, I have a lot of emotions, some anxiety. Haven't been behind the wheel of a truck since December 14th, which is the day I took my CDL test. And I don't like that. I wish it had been sooner, but then also seeing some of the crazy stuff that's been going on out there and watching some of my other favorite YouTube truckers talk about the conditions out there in these snowstorms makes me think, you know what, it's probably for the best that I'm not out there training in that crap, which is not to say that I won't still end up driving in crazy winter conditions. I think I have a lot more experience with bad weather driving than a lot of other people who are new truck drivers. So that definitely makes me feel like I have an advantage. And I understand that the key to driving in winter weather is patience and not driving too fast. You're gonna get there. It's better if you get there alive and no one else ends up getting hurt in the process. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously. Here I am, by the way. This video is gonna be too long, I already know. Here I am using 3 different shades of foundation to get the one I want. So anyway, a brief history of my musical obsessions. I've been thinking about making this video. I was a singer in a couple different bands. One was pretty short. It was an original band, and one was a cover band that went on for years. And we still didn't play a ton of shows, but like when we finally split in 2016, it was because the drummer had left the band suddenly, and it was like a devastating loss because all the guys in the band had been playing music together for a really long time and were massively talented. I know that might sound like, oh yeah, you know, you think that because you were in a band with them that they're so great. No, these guys were exceptionally good. I started the band initially and my idea is cheesy, but I don't care. I don't care. One of my favorite bands of all time is Soundgarden. I'm a grunge girl at heart from the 90s, you know, and I've been into singing since I was a kid, but I never thought I had any kind of a, you know, above average voice until I started taking some voice lessons and had an actual instructor work with me on sort of stretching what my voice could do and started doing vocal warm-ups, and that changed it because I was able then to expand my range way beyond what I thought I was capable of. One of my favorite compliments of all time is as I was walking out of one of those voice lessons, this teacher who was a jazz singer, and that's a side note I'll tell you in a second, but she introduced me to somebody that I think might have been her husband, and she called me the rocker girl with the high B. And I don't know what a high B is, but I'm assuming it's a pretty high note. I was like, that's really cool. And in those lessons, I was able to hit notes that I would have not thought I would be able to hit, but it was because we were doing warm-up scales and going higher, 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 and my voice would open up the more that we went. It was really neat. It was really amazing, having been a personal trainer and understanding how coaching works, that you can take someone who has potential, and when you know the thing that you're trying to teach them, like she knew voice in a way I didn't, just like when I was working with someone who was not experienced in doing certain types of exercise that I was teaching them, but I could tell by basically just watching them move what they were capable of. And it was like that, where she was able to get my voice to a new level. It was so cool. But the thing that didn't work well, that was interesting, is like what I was just going to say about her voice and her singing. So as a jazz singer, I don't know anything about different styles of singing really. But what I do know is that I've always been a rock singer. I like to say, I'm getting ahead of my story because I wanted to start from like earlier in my musical obsession life. I first started like really singing consistently when I was in high school, and I became fully obsessed with Allison Chains. And I would sing along with the album Facelift, which was their first major album. I don't know if they did any smaller stuff before that. They probably did. I was obsessed with Lane Staley. I was obsessed with his voice, and his voice wasn't even quite as big as I could have, you know, been imitating. And I learned that later when I started getting obsessed with Soundgarden and Chris Cornell and singing along with him. And that's what really brought my voice to a different place. Rock singing is generally bad for your voice. And I don't have the technical understanding to really explain it to you. Basically, when you're singing above a certain range, you're gonna want to, if you're singing in a way that's healthy for your voice, you're gonna sing in your head voice. And when you're singing rock stuff, like let's say you're singing Led Zeppelin or you're singing Soundgarden or something, and you're singing these high notes, but you're projecting them, it's like you're singing it with your vocal cords in your throat. You're singing like from here instead of like up in your sinuses, and it sounds completely different. Like when you hear someone singing opera, they're singing in a head voice much of the time. Not that they're not supporting from the diaphragm. That's a whole other thing that, again, it's above my pay grade to try to explain voice like that, because I'm not I'm not a voice teacher. There's significant differences in the way you use your voice for those different singing styles. And because my voice teacher was a jazz singer, it's crazy how, I'm sure I still have recordings somewhere of her singing something, and then like so that I could imitate it. It was like she would sing it first and then I would sing it, and hearing the difference in the power in our voices. I have the kind of voice that some people would hear and be like, whoa, that's a powerful voice. But no, if you hear me singing next to someone like her who actually has the physical training and like experience of singing a style where she is projecting the right way, it's like her voice has so much more volume to it. And I don't mean volume like loud, I mean like volume, like it fills the room. Whereas I can sing like these rock songs that sound like powerful, but it doesn't have the same support underneath it, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm kind of geeky about this stuff. One of the things that I fantasize about doing in the future after trucking is something I've always wanted to learn, which is audio engineering or sound engineering. I would love, I'm getting chills talking about it. I love working in live music spaces, and I don't obviously want to bartend forever because it's it's a punishing exercise, let me put it that way, in some ways. Anyway, I would love to do sound engineering in a live music space someday. I think that would be super cool. Again, another field where that's underrepresented by women for some fucking reason. And I would love to, whether it be an apprenticeship or go to school and apprentice or whatever, someday, I would like to be a sound engineer. That would be cool. That'd be so cool. Anyway, let me back up and tell you about the history of my musical obsessions. My earliest memories of life are of listening to records with my dad, and I'm so grateful that that was something that was part of my childhood. And unfortunately, a lot of my childhood got hijacked by a very weird and bullshitty religion. And that interfered so much, because when my dad got into that religion, he started restricting the types of music that we could listen to and stuff like that, which was crazy because his ass was all into music all his life, into this all kinds of like classic rock stuff, but like he was really into Frank Zappa, he was into Parliament Funkadelic, he was into cool shit. And he and my mom met while waiting in, like, for the first time, they met while waiting in line for Rolling Stones tickets. Like, my life exists because of music. Isn't that cool? I love that story. And my mom and dad both are big music lovers. My mom loved like Genesis and Alan Parsons Project and like nerdy stuff like that, very nerdy. Moody Blues, she always loved the Moody Blues. I still get emotional hearing some of that stuff now because it brings me back to like early childhood, especially Genesis. I love Genesis too, I can't lie. But my dad listened to like The Who and like Tom Petty, Jefferson Airplane, and like some really great stuff. That those were my earliest auditory memories, are these records. Music was like an obsession for me from a really early age, and like I always was musical and had ability, and I think I would always kind of be singing and stuff. Back in my day, we didn't have money. We didn't have a color TV when I was a little kid. We had a black and white TV, which I think is awesome because it deterred us from wanting to watch TV. Listening to music was our major form of entertainment besides playing outside. When I first started to like become obsessed with someone, it was Janet Jackson. Full on, man, Janet Jackson. When I was 8 years old, I lived with my mom for that year. There was this music video show that would play every day after school. I would always watch, I would have to watch it because when a new Janet video came out, and then later Madonna, then I became fully obsessed with Madonna. That lasted forever. I still have like my Instagram For You page is like 60% old Madonna photos and interviews and stuff. So remember how I told you that my dad was like really restrictive and weird about stuff we could listen to? This also plays into how I became obsessed with rock and like some metal music. And when I was 8 years old for that year, so I was in third grade, we lived with my mom for that year. My older brother around that time was getting really into Metallica. And I remember him blasting these records. He had the records of like Kill 'Em All, and I'm pretty sure he had Ride the Lightning, and then I remember Master of Puppets. And my dad, dad strikes again. You're gonna laugh at this. Especially, I laugh at this now looking at like the current context of Metallica, how like you see kids wearing Metallica t-shirts that they got at something like a Target and they've never listened to Metallica before. Like they don't have the reference for it, like how Metallica was like considered pretty tough and scary to the mainstream back in the early 80s because metal was a new thing. My dad, of course, without having read the lyrics clearly, the same person who had a lot of problems with addiction before I was born and after throughout my young life, said that the song Master of Puppets was about Satan. And if you're not familiar with this song Master of Puppets is about cocaine addiction. Okay, which is funny. It's the irony. I can't, So my dad actually, I'm pretty sure that he like took that record. He had a thing about taking stuff to work and putting it in the dumpster or something like that. So he took my brother's record and got rid of it. And my brother was upset. And my older brother's 3 years older than me. So I was 8. So he was like 11. He was just, getting into that really angry, rebellious phase. But I remember him blasting those records and being like, as an 8-year-old, being like, part of me didn't like it because I didn't think I was supposed to, because of the weird shit that my dad had like brought into it, and it was loud and it was like intense and it was novel to me. But there was a little part of me that thought it was cool, that liked it, And then years later, I became fully fucking obsessed with Metallica. So obsessed. And I still will always, forever, have a special place in my heart for Metallica. What I'm about to tell you would have never flown under my dad, because my dad was when he got into this fucking religion, it was Jehovah's Witnesses. He got so restrictive, and like, especially toward me, because that religion, like many, is very like, women are subservient and have to be like, you can't express yourself. If you're a woman, especially, you really can't express yourself. Wanting to emulate some of these female artists would not have been okay. So there was a lip sync contest at the very end of, it was like the last week of school or something when I was in third grade. And I decided that I wanted to lip sync to Nasty by Janet Jackson because I was fucking into that song. And my mom was like, cool. So she let me wear her black Harley Davidson shirt. So I could, I had to be in all black. Janet wore all black back then. She has for much of her career, right? I had my mom's t-shirt on. My mom let me use her red lipstick. I so wish there was a picture of this, because I would absolutely gleefully share it and probably have a laugh with you. Black stirrup pants, some kind of black shoes, and I was by myself, and I had this girl that was like my little friend who I tried to get to do a thing with me, and she wouldn't. She ended up doing a different like lip sync with someone else that wasn't cool. And I was in this tiny podunk white town, like everyone's fucking white in this town, and I'm doing a lip sync in front of all these parents to Nasty by Janet Jackson. And I just remember like seeing the look on their faces, just the disapproval, like horror, like what is this little girl doing? And I thought I was awesome, and I did not understand why I didn't win, because I bet that shit was kind of cool. I really loved Control, and that video still, like when I see it, I'll still like feel it. I'll still feel excited when she comes down on that swing over the stage, like, and she has the huge hair, and there's Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis on the like keyboards or whatever next to her, and she's dancing like, man. Or like Pleasure Principle, doing the flips, the cute little body, the straight hairstyle, like everything, like that shag hairstyle. I love Janet Jackson. I still love Janet Jackson. I've only seen her perform live once, and it was actually at the venue where I work now, but it was way before I ever worked there, and she was awesome. And me and my friends saw it, and we were like dancing the whole time and drinking and having a great time, and like it was a fantastic show. That woman is a great show woman. She puts on an awesome performance, and like I just think she's the coolest person. I love her. So yeah, see, I still get excited talking about Janet, even though I haven't like followed as much of her recent stuff, because it was just more of my childhood musical obsession. So then kind of around the same time, there was Madonna. And I'm sure you all can imagine that my dad was just thrilled with me wanting to emulate her. I felt similarly. It was around the same age, same time period when Open Your Heart came out, the video where she's like doing the striptease and she's got like the super cute like corset-y kind of costume with like the tassels and shit. And she was so hot. Like that young Madonna was super hot. I was obsessed with Madonna, very obsessed, like all through high school. It was like this alternating obsession between Madonna and Metallica, to tell you the truth, which is funny, I know. And those aren't the only artists that I listened to, or a couple of my favorites, and they had this sort of nostalgia appeal. And I think part of it for me, which I'm sure there's others out there who can relate to this, when you grew up in an environment that was often tainted by traumatic experiences, frequent moves, always being the new kid in school, experiencing poverty, not having nice clothes, so you get bullied, stuff like that. That was like what my life was like growing up for most of my young life. Struggling in school because the things going on at home were stressful, and always moving and having like the interruptions in my education, all that stuff. Music was a way for me to stay centered. You know, music was like something to cling to. It was like, so I think I developed a little more obsessiveness with the artists that I was into in a way, because they felt more solid to me than anything else in my life. And I also, when I was like 9, we moved to Southern California after that year when I did the Janet Jackson lip sync thing. When I was 9, that's when in Southern California, the school that I went to, I was given a choice to play in the school band and play choose an instrument. And they had the school instruments there. And because my big brother played the baritone, I wanted to play the baritone like my big brother. And the baritone horn, not the baritone sax. So I always describe it to people who don't know what that is. It's like a smaller version of a tuba, kind of. And I was like this little 9-year-old playing this big horn that makes like loud, low pitched sounds. And I fell in love with it right away. I played the baritone from the time I was 9 until I was 16, almost 17. In junior high school marching band. Fun fact, we played in Bill Clinton's inaugural parade, which was a really big deal. We had to raise all this money to go play in that parade, and it was such an adventure. It was my freshman year of high school. So, there was me being a band geek simultaneously with being into all these musicians. And sometime during junior high, back in my day, we didn't have cable for a long time because we didn't have any money. So we didn't have like MTV and stuff like that. So we listened to the radio all the time. And for that period of time, for a couple of years, I had 3 stepsisters, and 2 of them were closer to my age. One was younger, like my little brother's age. So we would listen to the radio all the time and like record stuff off the radio. It's one of the like musical imprints that I'll never forget. The influence of like hearing certain rap and hip hop when it was new. I remember when I first heard the song Supersonic on the radio, and we were like, what is this? We were so excited by this song. By JJ Fad, and like it was a thing where if you wanted to hear a song again on demand, you had to have a cassette tape and be ready to record from the radio, and you had to wait for the song to come on and try not to miss the beginning and hope that the disc jockey's not talking over the beginning of the song and all this other shit. So yeah, I remember I got that song on cassette and I was stoked about it. And a while back, I found that on Spotify, and it still gave me like such happy feelings hearing it. That song is awesome. It makes me think of before that, hearing Run DMC for the first time, like Run DMC with Aerosmith doing Walk This Way, seeing like them walk down the stairs with the Adidas shoes with no laces on, and like this, it was such a new sound to have in the mainstream at that time, and it was so fucking cool. That stuff, especially seeing the different styles of music sort of coming together, seeing rap kind of like cross over with rock, and seeing the different musicians embrace each other in that space, that was really cool. And then being in Northern California during the time when a lot of rap and hip hop and R&B music was like becoming much more part of the mainstream, although it was still like so weirdly segregated on like MTV, where they wouldn't play certain music during certain times. They wouldn't play black music during certain times. They would like relegate it to its own show, like Yo MTV Raps. And it's fascinating to me how the landscape of music has changed and integrated so much, even though like we are still such a segregated and like very messed up society, for lack of a more eloquent way to put it. So a lot of that music, like black music, I was not allowed to listen to. And it was partly because of whose house I was living in at the time, which wasn't my dad's house. And that person being like, not on my TV, like, you can't listen to that. And it wasn't even explicitly saying like you can't listen to it because it's black music, but that was the fucking reason. And that always irritates me. But at least I was able to listen to what I wanted to with my friends on the radio, in the car. Like we were always listening to like hip hop and like, you know, just mainstream fun music and singing along in the car. My one crazy friend would sing out the windows at random strangers and we would laugh our fucking heads off. And all through this time, I was obsessed with Metallica too, again. My first live concert when I was just about to turn 13 was Metallica at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, which is like Metallica's home base. And that shit was awesome. It was in support of the Black Album. I was like super into them by that point. And only got into them more and more, obviously, after that. I saw a few other Metallica shows over the years. After that, I saw them with Guns N' Roses, and I'm so bummed now that I wasn't nearly as big of a Guns N' Roses fan then as I am now, because, like, man, that was Guns N' Roses in their prime. And this was at Oakland Stadium, and of course, back then, if you know anything about Guns N' Roses in that era, like when they were in their prime, Axl Rose was always creating all this bullshit. He would always be really late to shows, and it was like this controversy between them and Metallica on that tour because Metallica was really professional and on time and everything, and they were like drinkers and partiers back then, but they would still like, they were there for their audience, you know, whereas Guns N' Roses, they were like partying and drinking heavily and like, you know, taking their time to get on stage and stuff. That show, they came on 2 hours late. So it was actually Body Count opened up, Body Count with Ice-T opened up for that show. Then Metallica, then Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses came on like 2 hours late. And the crowd was so pissed off waiting that they tore up the turf. The whole field was fucking destroyed. And I just remember it was like raining chunks of turf and garbage, like raining, because people were just throwing shit in the air because they were so mad. And then finally they came on, and of course they put on a fucking explosive performance. I enjoyed it to the extent that I was capable without really knowing their music. But now I look back and I'm like, you fucking idiot. Like they were so good then. And they were, man, like, you know, Axl running across the stage in his tight little white bike shorts, and he's probably on like a pound of cocaine, and like, you know what I mean? Like he's fucking singing his little ass off and stuff. Like those were the days. That was like an era for music, you know, that is kind of cool to have been able to witness it. How about that? How wild is that? That the same person who threw away my brother's Master of Puppets album also took me to see my first Metallica concert. And I guess that sort of encapsulates the general like confusion / fuckery that made my childhood so very colorful. When I said my dad liked to like take things to work and throw them away, one of the ones that truly broke my heart was when Madonna did the Blonde Ambition tour, which I still think is epic. Like the stuff she was doing on stage back then was so controversial for a woman to be doing, or really anyone, like simulating masturbation and all this other shit. And like she almost got arrested at one of the shows, you know, because they threatened that if she did this masturbation scene, they were going to arrest her. Like, think about that. Think about how radically different things are now and the things that people do on stage. Like, you know, we got some wet ass pussy stuff on stage going on, and like, what a crazy. Anyway, our neighbor who had HBO played Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour. It was recorded in Nice, France. I fucking watched the shit out of that video. And my dad, imagine watching Madonna simulate masturbation and you are 11, 12 with your dad. Okay, I was such a dumb, naive kid. I should have hidden that video, but I was too dumb to do that. We sat there and my dad was like, oh, we're gonna watch this. And then he took it to work and threw it away. And I was like, God damn, at least that's what he said. That broke my little heart. So then, you know how I said that I had like concurrent obsessions with Madonna and Metallica? So when I was a sophomore in high school, I was 15 at this time, I decided, I was just fantasizing one night laying in bed, and I was like getting myself all excited. I was like, oh my God, I gotta do this. And I decided I was gonna make up a dance routine and perform Vogue at our school's talent show, right? And I was a band geek, but I knew all these girls who were in color guard who had more dance experience. Stop honking your fucking horn. City living. That's the kind of shit that I listen to. I got these girls in color guard to do this dance routine with me, and I was Madonna. Of course, I was Madonna. I got this hairpiece, and I think the hairpiece, I bought the hairpiece first. It was the I Dream of Jeannie ponytail, which I still have somewhere. And I had bought the hairpiece without my hair even being long enough to like put it on, because it was the Madonna hairpiece. Of course you buy it, you know, at a costume store. I didn't even know what I thought I was going to do with it. Well, I ended up using it and like pulled my hair up, which was longer at the time, sprayed my brunette hair blonde with this blonde hairspray. It worked really well, surprisingly, and had this hairpiece on. I figured out how to do all this myself and did the whole makeup. And then these girls in color guard understood better than I did that stage makeup needed to be like way more dramatic. And it was these girls who legit wore chola makeup like all the time. That was their style. They were cholas. I hope that doesn't sound like I'm saying something derogatory, because I think chola is like a force and it's fucking cool in my opinion. So they didn't do chola makeup on me. They just did really, really dramatic, intense Madonna makeup, and it looked fucking great in the photos and stuff. I wish I had it. I probably do have a good picture. I will show you. We won an award for that performance. We won like best dance performance, and it was cool because we had a big high school. There was a lot of performances. That talent show in particular was really good and really fun. The Vogue performance was badass. I actually watched a video that I had of Vogue. I don't know where I got it from, but I watched it over and over and over and over, like rewinding on a VCR and playing over and over, and learned the choreography to the chorus. So the girls in the color guard did the choreography for the other parts, and I taught them that choreography, even though I had like no dance experience, and it was fucking awesome. And then people started calling me Madonna on campus at school, and I was fucking stoked. Man, it was just a blast. That was one of my happiest like high school memories. You know, it was like, this is me being a ham, being on stage. It is so like in my wheelhouse. I love performance, so those were really fun times. I'm having a day where I don't really feel like putting on makeup, but I just felt like doing it for this video. So I'm defaulting to my usual Raw Beauty Christie ColourPop at Forest Sight palette, which is kind of my go-to whenever I feel the need to put makeup on, but I don't really feel excited about it or in the mood, because it's just always a good go-to. So anyway, musical obsessions. Not too long after the Madonna talent show experience, around that time was starting to get really into grunge music. It felt like it was very local, even though, I mean, I was in Northern California and grunge was in Seattle, but it just, there's something about it that felt very local to me and felt like something that I wanted to be a part of. And around that same time, my uncle bought me a guitar and got me guitar lessons with his friend who taught guitar. And I took them briefly, and it is one of the biggest regrets of my life that I did not continue playing guitar. And one of the main reasons why was because my family was ripped in half by my father's drug addiction, and I had to leave California, and I left my guitar behind and my amp. I still can't quite wrap my head around why I left the guitar behind. There was something in my head at that time that I could only bring so much stuff with me, and I couldn't bring it. It would be too expensive to take it with me or something. It was like when you're a kid and things feel impossible and all the things that are happening are really traumatic, and like maybe you just make up reasons in your head why you can't do something. But it still kind of breaks my heart, because I know now that, and I guess I kind of knew then, that even though I have written some cheesy songs, I have an aptitude for writing. I'm a writer, but I have an aptitude for songwriting as well. I can write simple songs, you know, and I'll actually include a link in this video to the only live performance that I can show you, because it's from one of the bands I was in. It was the original band, because I wrote the song, and like I used to have a bunch of videos of the cover songs I did on my YouTube, and they're now set to like private because they all got copyright marks on them. But this was like a bunch of cover songs of like Led Zeppelin and Soundgarden, Audio Slave and stuff like that. you can't post that stuff on your channel without getting flagged for copyright. So those videos are set to hidden, but I'll put one on there of a song that I wrote, so it's not copyrighted. I wrote the lyrics and I wrote the basic like bass line. I think I had a bass and a guitar at that time. I feel like I have a knack for writing poppy rock songs, like sort of simple, catchy kinds of songs. If I had started writing songs as a kid, I would probably be able to write things that are more interesting and reflect more of skill, you know? This song, I thought was kind of fun. I still kind of like that video. It was a performance at the Elbow Room in Chicago. I thought I read somewhere that it closed. I hope that's not true. That place was really cool. It's like a little bar, but it was a great place to play a show, and their sound guy was always really good. We played there a couple of times. It wouldn't be my first choice of like the best example of me as a singer because it's a little bit pitchy. It's like a simplistic song, but it's still kind of cool and kind of fun. And I am wearing a wig in that video. I pretty much always used to, or often I would perform in wigs because it's just kind of fun to like change your style for a performance like that. And flipping a wig around is really fun. Going back, when I was in high school, I had first started singing along with Allison Chains. What's interesting is I had never used any substances at that point. Like I had experimented with cigarettes, but I had never been drunk. I had never really drank alcohol. I had never smoked weed or anything like that when I started getting into that music. But if you know their music, you know that it's very heavily themed around Lane Staley, the singer's addiction to heroin, which was really tragic and sad and ended up taking his life. I was obsessed with that music, and I was experiencing my father's addiction and the impacts of that, and had been for most of my childhood. So that music, it was interesting because him talking about his addiction, it felt personal for me. It felt like something that I could relate to because I was living with someone who was going through addiction. I always felt really drawn to those themes in music. And what's weird about it now, looking back, having struggled with my own addiction problems, is like, I don't subscribe to the disease model of addiction, so I'm not trying to say that I think I have a disease or like I was destined to become addicted. I don't think that's true. I think if I had had the right type of support, I could have gone down a different road. But it's always been like a part of me that's possible, you know, especially because of the way that I grew up. So it's weird to look back and note it and realize that I related to that music in ways that I didn't fully understand at the time. But I was really into Allison Chains. I actually did see them live once with Lane Staley. It was in San Jose, at San Jose State. They performed there once. And I will show you a picture here of me being so cool in the shirt that I got at that show. The long story short is like I started to get into Allison Chains. I got into 9 Inch Nails. I started getting into some music that had some darker themes in it. I was that angsty teenager, yes, but also going through things that the music explored, even vicariously, and it helped me to cope. But it also wasn't the best thing because it led to me sort of diving into this angry side of myself, and for a long time the music that I listened to was very dark and angry. I think that can be a healthy release for people, and I think that for some people like me, it ended up being an unhealthy thing over time because it sort of was consuming, where I sort of took on a different persona that was trying to live in this type of like darker reality, if that makes any sense. And that sort of coincided with my own venturing into substance abuse. But I didn't want to get into all that. I don't want to make this video dark and depressing, but I will say, like, during that whole time, I definitely got into like more metal. And I also was dating somebody for a long time who was a real metalhead, so ended up getting into some other stuff, like listening to Slayer and Sepultura and stuff like that. Saw Slayer live a couple of times. They were awesome. My tastes in music have been kind of all over the map for a lot of my life, and there's always been these obsessions around certain artists. Years later, when I was in my 20s and late 20s, and I would be singing in my car and sort of had given up on the idea of like ever being in a band or anything. When I started getting into singing more down the road, like singing in my car and stuff, and that was when I really got obsessed with Soundgarden again. It like came back to me. Then I started to figure out that I actually could sing this stuff. I started doing vocal exercises, and like I was like, oh, I really can sing this stuff. I'm capable of this. That wasn't that long before my marriage came to a very sudden and unexpected end. And that was what led to me starting that band, is needing an outlet, a creative outlet, and wanting to do something that I didn't For whatever reason, when I was married, I kind of limited my life in certain ways. If anyone is watching this and is married, they might relate to that, where it's not because the marriage necessarily keeps you from doing stuff, but it's like a psychological, self-imposed set of limits that you put on yourself. And that was definitely something that I kind of did, which is weird to think about now. I didn't have to do that. And my ex is... Oh yeah, that was one of the things I was going to say in this video that I didn't say yet. One of the things I'm so grateful for about having met him is that he's a super music freak. And I grew up in a really weird environment where I was judged for liking things that, like, my older brother and my uncle, who were big influences in my young life, if they didn't think something was good, I wasn't allowed to like it. And it was like really an intense environment where that was not like optional. You can't, if you like something that we think is shitty, we're gonna fucking rip you a new one for it. This is the same uncle who bought me the guitar and like loved music, but they were just super judgmental. It was especially my older brother though. He was really bad with that kind of stuff. And in fairness, he did have some good musical taste. I'm not in touch with him anymore, but he was a brilliant bass player. He is very, very musically gifted. That's, you know, that was always something about him. It was just very natural to him. He introduced me to some music too that definitely helped my development as an audiophile. I don't even know if I would call myself that, because I'm not one of those people that could sit here and rattle off like names of artists and stuff like that. I don't have that type of memory, but I can listen to something and appreciate it and feel like the value in it. Another thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't, like my experience getting into hip hop and rap music more in recent years, and how like I started listening to Kendrick Lamar first as someone I wanted to dive into. Rather than listen to a whole bunch of different artists in a genre, I will tend to focus on one or two and really just like deep dive into that artist and like obsess over them and listen to all of their stuff. And that's what I did with Kendrick Lamar. I didn't listen to that music initially because I had this weird feeling of like, the people who make this music don't want me to listen to it. It's not for me. It's not about my life. It's none of my business. Like, I don't know, it sounds weird to say that, but that was kind of what I was thinking about. I think it was when Damn was like really blowing up and I was like, I have to listen to this album. I have to understand what the excitement about this is. And I started listening to it, and it of course blew my mind, and I started listening to all of his albums and being just really blown away by him as a force of nature. And then, wow, seeing some of his live performances, that's just a whole other level. That dude is like, he's like a super being of talent. That was a really great thing for me, and it made me realize like I was limiting myself from listening to music because I felt like I would almost be insulting the people that made it. I know that sounds weird, but maybe someone out there understands what I'm talking about. When I started listening to it, I realized, no, this music is really important for me to listen to because this is educational. This is exposing me to information and experience that other people have that I need to do my best to understand better. So that's kind of how I started to listen to more rap music, more hip hop. I sound like such a white lady. More rap music. I want to hear the different narratives that people have to offer. I have to say too, a major reason why I never wanted to listen to that, like it was definitely part of my earlier life, like in high school and some college, like listening to Dr. Dre and like Snoop and all that stuff. Of course, like we were in California in the 90s. We were definitely listening to that music. But there was a part of me that felt like real frustrated by the amount of misogyny in that music and just feeling like I don't want to listen to these guys that think that women are literal trash. You know what I mean? That was like a huge turnoff to me. I still have really positive memories when I think about people like Queen Latifah singing like UNITY and like, you know, very like pro-woman, pro-feminist sort of narrative that women are not, you ain't a bitch or a hoe, as she said in that, I think that was that song. There were voices like that were really important. And then like Salt and Peppa was like an early one when I talked about earlier about I can't talk about music without going all like back and sorry, it's really difficult to do that. When Supersonic came out, that wasn't too far away from when Salt and Peppa did Push It. Dude, when I first heard that, again, my brain exploded, and that was one of those songs that my dad was like, you can't listen to that, that's about da da da, you know, like anything that was remotely sexual we couldn't listen to, and I was like, fuck that, man, that song is dope. That song still stands the test of time. And that was another like group of like strong badass women that inspired me as a kid. But because of the weird fucking energy in my family, I had this sort of barrier of like, I shouldn't be listening to this because this music isn't for me, and because like my family doesn't approve of me listening to this, so I have to like listen to it on the radio with my friends or whatever. It's really weird. It's weird growing up in a family that's plagued by racism. It's unfortunate and stupid. I'm really afraid to say some of that stuff and put it out on the internets because, you know, it's hard to talk about, and it's also like it puts you in a weird position of like just acknowledging things like that are really uncomfortable. Like I always say in these videos, I think it's really important to be vulnerable and to be honest. I think if more of us talk about stuff like that and can sort of share the fact that the way that we think about things can be really nuanced and things are not black and white, and we live in a world where people want you to choose a side, like you have to choose a team. Fuck that, dude. Seriously, fuck that. That's what's wrong with our culture, is that we're all choosing a team and then everyone else has to be like fucking, we have to hate them. I think that's the worst, most self-destructive and mutually destructive way to go about life. So do I want to talk about the fact that racism plagued my family? No. Do I want to talk about how that affected my own willingness, ability to listen to and appreciate different genres of music? I mean, I don't really, because it feels bad, but it's also true. These are the interesting conversations that help us all find understanding with each other, is understanding how like every area of our lives is affected by these big things. It's important to like honestly share that and show yourself kindness and compassion for the things that the choices that you made that didn't make sense or were like really negative even, because of the influences that surrounded you, especially from the people who are supposed to love you the most. Of course, you're going to feel affected by that stuff. Okay, I guess one last little note. So cover bands. Yeah, so I was in this cover band for a long time. I had the idea originally to make it a Soundgarden cover band with related bands also, which wouldn't make any sense. You either are a tribute band or a cover band. But I love the idea of a woman coming out and singing Soundgarden songs. And we did include a few Soundgarden songs, but Soundgarden, as much as they're a mainstream act, they're still a little nichey. Not one of those bands like everyone knows the song Black Hole Sun, but that's just like one, there's so much more to that band than that song. So we ended up doing like Soundgarden, Allison Chains, of course, Guns N' Roses. I love singing Guns N' Roses. We did some classic stuff. So we did like Led Zeppelin. We did some AC/DC, Highway to Hell. We did, I think that was the only one we did by them. Heart. We covered Tool. And when I said earlier that we had a really awesome drummer, everyone in the band was really solid. We were such a great team of people, and playing with them brought me back to like childhood, and it was so much fun because it was like being a band geek all over again, but actually getting to like sing all these rock songs that I really loved. So I'm a good person to bring to karaoke if you ever need somebody, is what I'm saying. My go-to karaoke song is White Rabbit, because that song is like, for me, it's pretty easy. I can sing the fuck out of it though. And it's also perfect for karaoke because it's not too long. And one thing you find out, even if you're a good singer doing karaoke and you go do it, especially if people are drinking, they're not even looking at you most of the time. They're just kind of like half paying attention. So don't sing a song that's too long because it gets awkward real quick. Anyway, I fucking love music. I love Soundgarden. Yeah, I was heartbroken when Chris Cornell passed away. I wish that he had been able to stick around. I was never like a huge Chris Cornell solo fan. There was something really, really special. Like, I didn't hate his solo work, but I love what he did with Temple of the Dog. That was incredible. Soundgarden was a really special, unique type of band. And what I liked about their music is that so much of it was very dark, and like these themes of, I feel like they created these landscapes of like mood. The way that Chris Cornell wrote songs, he wasn't such a literal writer. It felt like almost dreamy, the way that he would describe things, but you knew what he was kind of talking about, the feelings that he was sort of alluding to. And there was also a lot of like sort of apocalyptic energy. I mean, Black Hole Sun is a very prime example of that, but a lot of other songs that had these sort of apocalyptic themes and like dark humor, and that's the kind of shit that I love. This video is gonna be way too long. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna finish up my makeup and come back on in a second and say a last couple of words, and that's about it. Well, this is the finished look. It's not my favorite. I totally, like I said, didn't really feel like putting makeup on today. But yeah, this is a very incomplete synopsis of my musical obsessions. There's so much more music that I listen to that I didn't talk about in this video. I think it's partly because, like I said, I tend to focus in on certain artists and sort of like obsess about them and get really, really into them. Overall, you know, music has absolutely been a defining force in my life. I still would love to play music or be involved in music, whether it is, you know, sound engineering someday. I most certainly want to sing with other musicians at some point again, because that is super fun and I really enjoy it. Creativity is important, and I think there are a lot of people out there who don't see themselves as creatives, and granted, some of us are more naturally inclined toward creative disciplines, whether it's like dance or art or music or writing or all of those kinds of things, which for me, all those things resonate. I just want to encourage anybody, you know, if you're in need of a way to, like, if you're depressed, okay, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling isolation, if you're dealing with anger, find a way to use creativity to express that. Write in a journal, all of those things, or like write some lyrics about it. Even if you don't intend to ever use them, like that stuff is so satisfying to get it out in a creative way. And I think it's not just people like me who are able to do that. I feel like I have to put a PSA at the end of every video, huh? But I just want to share this stuff because I think it can be helpful to people. Some of us sort of have a definition of who we are, and it can be a little bit limited because of our life experience or because of, kind of like I talked about earlier in my video, influences in your life that limited you and made you think you can't do a certain thing because of who you are. Then if you want to get something off your chest, if you have emotions or situations in life that are really difficult to deal with, I would just encourage you to consider finding a creative outlet, any kind of creative outlet. I think that we all have that in us. And music has absolutely been a savior in my life in every phase of life, and it will continue to do so. And I'm definitely going to be listening to some stuff on the road. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I often forget to say that. And I'll catch you on the next one.